I'm in the video. Hey. Alright, anyway, responsive sorts to a couple of videos. Took some notes. This guy, Peter Rodier, I guess that is. Anyway, this mistaken procreator guy, both made, pleasant videos. And then the evil of the day, of course. There's nothing you can say. I mean, there's people who are obnoxious. I'll get to that. Maybe. So anyway, to the mistaken procreator guy. So I just thought I'd address a couple of his, I don't know, apprehensions about recognizing the, not even so much recognizing, I guess, supporting. I don't know. It's kind of like some scary thing to become an ethicist or an unlifist or whatever. Maybe somebody will come up with a better word for it. So it's not like this whole anti-thing you really don't want to have to be. But anyway, a lifist. Maybe. Anyway, so he brought up a couple of issues. You like the term chasing comfort. It's a way of just describing what we do. I like kind of need machine. Somebody sent me a t-shirt with that written on it. Yeah. It's just the nature of nature to create the motivation, blah, blah, blah. It's, yeah. I give you what you want. 10 minutes want is going to just start percolating, leaking back into your brain. You're going to just start noticing something else that's wrong, and you're going to need to fix it. And sadly, that is our plight. We see it happen. People start plucking their eyebrows or something, and all of a sudden they have no eyebrows. We start looking for imperfection, and that's just the nature of our circumstance. So if we keep things, that's my plan. Keep things really imperfect, then you'll just give up and say, oh, fuck that. Who cares? It sort of does work for people, I mean, the people who find comfort the easiest seem to be the people who have the least, There's sort of an inverse relationship there. But anyway, that's all psychology. And you have to work through the psychology to get to the intellect of people. And just another fact, that we have to get through the burden of, ooh, he be ugly. Ooh, he be talking funny. He got a big nose. I mean, just the little things, there's people, even when I'm making these physics videos, I was watching some, and it's like, sometimes it's like not even what the guy is saying, it's just his persona is so fucking obnoxious, that you're just like, there's no way he can be right about anything, because he's such an asshole, as a person. And so that happens too. But that's all psychology. We should, at least in principle, at least as a theme, want not to react to that kind of crap. Not to be influenced too dramatically by that psychology, that sense, that impression, those kind of oh, he gives me a feeling and it isn't a good one, kind of thing. So anyway, it's a couple of little subjects came up. He mentioned democracy, because I had brought it up. That ideally or even rationally, you want progressive change in the world to take place through some sort of rational, fair process. And yes, democracy is the best of the choices, but the real problem is we don't have a democracy, and we don't have this representative kind of thing. We just represent the same geographic majorities everywhere, and the minorities are left out entirely. Unless they're geographically segregated, minorities will be voted voted out of the democracy, and that's just bullshit. And we could fix that. So that's one of these things where I just say, look, democracy could be salvaged. And I think, you know, people would vote for it. You explain, well, look, we can have a fair fight or an unfair fight. You know, and they'll understand that even if they have advantage in the cheat, that yeah, they'd like to feel like they have real balls and something called integrity. And I think people would vote for the fair fight. And certainly the majority of people who feel cheated by some element of the system, it says most people, even the privileged, I think they kind of want the opportunity to make the argument and have the other people have to humiliate themselves by actually making a counter argument rather than just sweeping everything under the rug kind of thing. So anyway, but yeah, so democracy is fixable. You just get rid of this geographic crap and start representing people by their ideology, not their geography. And I've done videos on that. All for VR, I think the channel name is, but yeah, it doesn't go anywhere, so people don't get it. They just react to, what's changing? I don't know, change. You know, they just run. More work needs to be done. Yeah, somebody else has got to do some of it. I can't do it all. Yeah, there's another thing. Snake Plissken as well, your Lord and Savior, he took down all his videos, which is annoying. I don't know whether he just made them private for a while. I don't know what he did. But I did want to keep that, you know, the conversation I had with him for a couple hours. So if somebody has a copy of that video, PM me or do whatever the necessary thing is, so somehow I can get my hands on it, and I'll repost it. So I thought it was I mean, from my point of view, yeah, yeah, it's worth preserving. So anyway, but yeah, see, if everybody just bails, there's no, you know, this one-man show stuff is just too much. But anyway. So the other thing, you kind of mock the idea of dropping leaflets, and but this is another one of the things where I'll just say that, you know, ignorance is correctable, and most of the world, especially the Muslim world, they're just really ignorant, and so they sort of need to be exposed to the alternative reality, and so I think it can be effective to just litter their world with rational, not lies or gross, you know, not Nazi propaganda, but just real statements about, is this how you want to represent humanity on Earth? A fable? I mean, do you really care about anybody else on this planet, or you're just going to basically blow your brains out with a stupid fable, blow your capacity to be anything rational for a fairy tale? I mean, those simple questions, I think, if people are exposed to them every 35 feet of their day, I'm saying is, let's just litter. Like I said, let's just, instead of daisy cutters, let's just drop billboards on Islam. And yeah, I think you can get through to them. I think you can make it understood that what we're fighting for, what your enemy wants, is just to have a peaceful, rational world where we don't waste each other's suffering, where things don't live, where they're not used up for something else's pleasure. You know, just simple, we're against rape too, you know, idea. And you know, the irony is that religious people who want to impose, you know, law and value on people's consciousnesses are the very people who think God bestowed us with free will and responsibility, where it's actually reasonable to, without it having any deterrent effect, because obviously it'd be after the world has been smited, this idea of a heaven and hell. Like there'd be some point in Jesus coming back to earth saying, okay, it's judgment time, and actually putting people in hell. I mean, there's no one to watch him put them in hell. There's no one to be, oh, you better have learned a lesson from that. I mean, it has absolutely no deterrent value anymore, and you're just going to torture them. But the idea that these people freely made some choice to be bad, the people who actually believe that are the idiots trying to take away their choice. It's supposed to be for God to impose that judgment. You're supposed to give them the opportunity to eat the apple. You're not supposed to cut down the apple trees. The book burners want to, they want to go back to the Garden of Eden and cut down the apple tree, so man can't prove his integrity or his devotion. So that's the irony. Is the people who believe that man needs to do that are the very people eliminating his ability to do that, to take responsibility for his judgment. Well, anyway, it's just irony. So it's another thing you could write on the pamphlets. You're being hypocrites. You could just point out all the duplicities and hypocrisies. So anyway, I think it just makes more sense than bombs and bullets. That's all my argument is. You're going to invest in something. You can't kill them all, so there's no point in killing any of them. In a way, as a matter of practicality, it sort of comes down to that. So anyway, you got to keep, in any kind of propaganda, in any kind of war of where, there's good guys and bad guys. The good guys really just can't behave like bad guys, because they're just going to muddy the water, and then you're just going to feed the other side's ability to make you into a bad guy. So if you always, turn the other cheek, if you do the Jesus thing, you'll win in the end. And that's the long-term road to victory, is not to get caught up in revenge and tit for tat and all of that kind of crap. You walk the high road, and you give people every incentive to walk it with you. And you just try not to ever, lower yourself to their methods. You just don't become one of them. Sort of like the irony of Israel, owning a concentration camp, full of Palestinians. There's an irony there. I mean, there's an imbecility there. So anyway, so I like to. He said something like, I'm not from Britain, so to speak. I'm not a nationality. I'm a sentient, and there's some way of describing what we are. The human variety of sentient organism. But yeah, the idea that the most important thing that we are is feeling creatures, and next we're thinking creatures, which is another biggie, and unfortunately then we're horny and hungry and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, the important ones is the feeling and the thinking, and if we do those things with discipline and integrity, honesty, and this shouldn't be a problem. The logic's there in terms of making an argument that you can't really, if you really analyze your life, like I said, you're invested in you. You're invested in your ego. And you really know that other people aren't you. And them winning the gold medal somehow isn't the same as you winning it. You know psychologically that difference. And so you shouldn't really pretend that anyone needs to win it. Because the only reason why you think winning it means something is because you would like to do it. And that's it. It's an ego thing. And don't project your ego. Don't live vicariously on the fantasy that you don't lie to me and tell me you really care. You know, that if we were to send 10 people into space to go colonize some planet, that you're somehow invested in that as anything but some sort of performance art. It just doesn't have any, it's not in any way going to be relevant to you. And again, all I have to do is change the people going there into some race that isn't your race, some form of human that you don't like, just fat people or something. And all of a sudden you're not going to see the sense in the mission at all. So just recognize how you're living on feelings, not on ideas. You're invested in your feelings, in your psychology, and you need to acknowledge that you should be paying more attention to that quieter, more rational voice saying, it's all bullshit, you know it. Anyway, so the last thing I guess was he made some comment about the whole end game. And, you know, the end game isn't really relevant to anybody participating in a sense, right? I mean, you just basically the argument, look, you stop procreating, the human race reduces in number, you just let everybody just die out through attrition. So everybody lives their debaucherous, hedonistic existence. They just don't play Frankenstein, they just don't make any more of them. And so there's no harm, no foul to any of the humans. And the last 100 or so that are left over will be the janitors, and they'll clean up the rest of the mess. And the humanest thing to do is just is how fast, you know, that's all it's really about. Sterilizing animals, frankly, it could be very unpleasant for them. It could make them sick, it could make, you know, it could be a very, not a good idea. Besides the fact that it would be terribly impractical to try to sterilize microorganisms and all this other stuff, so it's just not very practical. And the truth is, nuclear bombs are pretty humane as long as you do them completely, right? I mean, the people at ground zero at Hiroshima and Nagasaki can't feel too bad for them. I mean, the ground zero people never knew what hit them. I mean, it's the people who live, you know, 20 miles away, 15 miles away. Those are the people that paid the price. The people who weren't completely, you know, annihilated. You know, so you just make sure you don't leave burn victims. You know, that you don't do it incompletely. So I'm just saying that, you know, reducing the earth to some, I'm just saying that, you know, if it's 3-second death, it's not a bad death. That's all I'm saying. Almost doesn't matter what it is. If it's only 3 seconds, you can handle it. So anyway, so yeah, I think that's enough for that video. So I'll move on. Do some physics later, I think. But anyway, so I guess it's holiday, unfortunately. So I won't bother with the usual preface of blah blah bullshit, and we'll get to the part where he's going to make the argument. So his argument is he's never liked the idea of calling this a game, recognizing that life has winners and losers, that there's winning and losing conditions, there's good conditions to be in and bad conditions to be in, and we can just acknowledge that. If you went to the store to buy a cupcake and you knew that the cupcake was made out of tortured children, okay, you would, you know, it'd have to be one hell of a cupcake, right? So this isn't impossible for you to understand the connection between what the cost of something is and how, whether it's purchasable. I mean, if you knew there was a slave camp that made TVs, and they just, the people were imprisoned and chained and they were whipped to make the TV, you'd choose some other brand, you know that, because you would value this equation, this simple logic that there are prices not worth paying for things. So he's now just trying to somehow make a mockery or mock the idea of this scorekeeping. And I don't, like I said, I think it's just fundamental to our, personal existence. I think we keep score in our lives. We certainly make risk assessments. We say, oh, I'd like to jump out of an airplane. Then we say, oh, hell though, I gotta drive an hour and a half to the airport, and it probably takes 3 hours to do this and that, and then you have to be trained with the parachute, and then you have to be listening to those bullshit, and then you go up in the airplane, you get air sick because there's turbulence, and blah, 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 and then you're taking the risk that the stupid chute won't open because it was packed by some kind of Puerto Ricans or something. And then you say, wait a minute. I could go outside, sit in a lounge chair and have a cigarette. Why would I bother doing that plane jumping out of thing? That's silly. There's lots of easier, more convenient, better ways to derive some sort of notion of comfort. I don't have to jump out of a plane. It'd be dumb. So we do it all the time.
England v USA in a soccer match, right? And he's saying, okay, USA have scored a goal. It's 1-0 to America. And then
yeah, so that would be in the idea of life. Well, the first big negative is you will inevitably die. And by statistical fact, okay, there's a 50% chance, let's say, that your death will take 1 year of degraded physical condition. At least a minimum of 50% chance that you'll spend at least 1 year wasting away because you're so incredibly miserable you can't even eat anymore. So that's whoops. Yeah, we got nailed on that one. So that's a baddie. So yeah, that's, and then you just keep going with this keeping score thing. Then you get to the part where you, me be all horny, me marry the bitch. And then 3 weeks later you're like, what the fuck was I thinking? Jeez, she's a succubus. Naggy. Well, anyway. So, yeah, oops, nil again. We are suckers by nature. And our satiability has no integrity. We think we will be satisfied. We get what we want, and oh, fuck, you're going to want something else. Damn.
all of a sudden changing the rules of the game and saying, yes, but England, that scoring a goal's good, right? Clearly scoring a good, they've not scored a goal, and that's good, right? So America's now 2-0 because England didn't score a goal. But they've still not scored a goal, and that's good, right? So,
see, I mean, this isn't a very good analogy. He's sort of making some argument that I'm being hypocritical or unfair in my math. Because, when you make this argument for this asymmetry, this idea that the nothing, there's some of it right here, isn't in a bad condition. And that this idea that the absence of good isn't bad. I'd like it to be, but it just isn't. Okay, here's some nothing. Here's some absence of pleasure and fun and goodness. It's not bad. It just isn't. But clearly, a whole ton of goods are derived by eliminating bads. It is good when bad isn't happening. The bad not happening here, somebody not burning to death in my hand, okay, so there's somebody not eating a cupcake and there's somebody not being burned to death. The not being burned to death is definitely good that that's not happening. But it's just not bad that somebody's not eating a cupcake. It just isn't. It can't be put into the negative ground. It can just be put into the, okay, no one's eating a cupcake. That's not a tragedy. It's not my fault the asymmetry exists. And frankly, these are lame efforts to pretend that somehow the absence of wanting and then gratifying your want, having a mosquito bite so you can scratch it, the fact that that's the way the world is, I'm sorry you don't like it. But this is a lame way to pretend that somehow it's a good idea to make needs so you can clean them up. That needs are a good thing. Because they make it bad for us not to have pleasure. And that's the truth. You need to create need. You need to create hunger, for the game to work. For you to contrive this idea of it's bad not to have good. Because you basically have to create the bad first, so they need the good. I mean, you're the one cheating. You're the one cheating, obviously.
America's now 3-0. Yeah, because England's not scored a goal.
Is there anyone who understands what he's doing here? How this is a rational response? No.
Yeah, it was a good save. They nearly scored a goal, but it was a save, and a save is a good, right? So 4-0. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think they write saves on the scoreboard, but whatever a save is, I imagine that's you stop the ball from going in the hole or something. Yeah, I think they only write down the ones where you actually put your ball in the hole.
And there's no logic. There's no stated beginnings about what counts.
Oh, yes, there is. I mean, look, we've been over and over and over this whole idea of how the nature of human psychology, the optimism bias, all of that's been explained. So to say there's no context for this conversation of understanding what has real value versus what is projected value. And the argument is the real value is in the negative condition, and most of the positives are corrections of a negative condition. And if you think they are free positives, they're free lunch positive, no negative required, you're probably projecting.
That's value, and why this particular comparing of existence and non-existence counts beforehand, what the assumptions are.
Yeah, well, look, again, suffering sucks. I mean, that's one of the assumptions. And pleasure is usually, most of the time, correction of a negative condition. You will feel good when the fever breaks, when you're relieved of your poverty, when, the negative exists first. So these arguments have been made. So bogus on you again for implying that there's no context to the conversation. And clearly Benatar's in the name of your video, and Benatar writes a whole book on these subjects. So I mean, to say that there's no context is just bogus.
It's clear to everybody, okay, we're going to value non-existent things. Right? First of all, everybody...
Well, obviously we're not going to value non-existent things. So again, the entire subject is about valuing the sensations, and that's it. So we're valuing not doing the negative sensation, and by your definition, by your perception, somehow we're undervaluing the positive sensations. That's your argument. Your argument isn't. So again, just recognize we're not valuing non-existence. We're valuing preventing harm.
Rejects that.
Again, we're stopping bad, and you're advocating that we should have bad so we can have something we might argue is just a projected good. It's not real. It's not nearly good enough to make up for the bad you open the door to.
And says, well, no, there's no...
Again, if the absence of something isn't a tragedy, it's hard to call it something that's that is good if it exists. It can't really be a good if it's not tragic that it's absent. Where clearly with suffering, it's a clear good when it's absent.
Well, you can value actions, so let's value actions and come up with some system for that.
Well, we've already done that. That's the whole better never to have been. The whole argument is the act of procreating is aggressively stupid. It's aggressively against the interest of the thing you're going to create. You will guarantee essentially that it will lose the match. It's going to end up with a balance in the end of a notional good and real suffering.
Right? But I'm not going to counter value to something that doesn't exist. You can't score double. You can't... you can't say...
Well, again, nothing good that's ever happened. Like I said, all the polio victims that didn't happen because of the polio vaccine, okay, they don't exist in a sense. All the polio victims don't exist. But the value, the good of that non-existence is clear. So, again, this is, you're just, again, arguing that if I prevent something, I've now made the value non-existent because the thing the bad didn't happen. You're saying I have to create the bad and then go back in time and eliminate it or something. No. We understand it would have been.
1 unit of good will cancel out 1 unit of bad. And then say...
Well, again, that's... I don't think anything's ever been put in those terms, but whatever. Like I said, the argument is asymmetry. The argument's just pointing out there's an imbalance. 1 unit to 1 unit, who knows? The argument's just simply there's this asymmetry. You can get to good by eliminating bad. You can't really get to bad by eliminating good. That's the argument. Not complicated. They're not the same thing.
Because the existence of that unit of bad counts 1. But if it doesn't exist, it's also somehow counting 1.
It's only 1, okay? So again, no one's counting it twice. So that's to imply there's double counting. That's not what's taking place. We're just acknowledging that there's value in preventing suffering. You get a 1 for that.
It's counting states of good and bad, qualitative.
The point is that when you prevent good, whatever that is, name something good, and that I prevented, that the value, okay, that's now a negative, because I prevented good, it's a negative. That doesn't work. It's not negative. It doesn't go to hell. Maybe it doesn't go to heaven, but it doesn't go to hell, where the inverse is true.
If existence states, you don't get a bonus point for the removal of a state. We're just weighing the existence of things.
Well, again, you can't. There's no weighing non-choice. So if you're just, I'm going to weigh the inevitable against the inevitable. No, you have to assume the existence of road A and road B. We have a choice. One road is better than the other road. Let's figure out which one is better. This road opens the door to suffering and harm. This road doesn't create any such open door. There's no way to lose taking this road. No way to win, but no way to lose.
Right, so this counting of non-existence is a surreptitious way of getting in a double count for what you
So there he goes again. There's no double count, so you can make that. You can say that. No, there's no double count. What you can say is that we're not sufficiently counting the value of the inverse number. You're saying that the negative of preventing pleasure is real, is a big real negative. It's a nasty, awful thing, substantially awful as causing harm. That's basically what you're saying. You're saying preventing pleasure is just as bad as causing harm. That's the asymmetry right there. Preventing pleasure is just as bad as torture. That's your argument. And the asymmetry is saying that's ludicrous.
appraise as additional value. Yeah, the way he phrases it, like, yeah, and that's the way the double count is. Taking away a bad is a good, but goods aren't intrinsically, as he puts it, a not good isn't a not bad. So he slipped in a double count.
Well, again, it's not a double count. It's just recognizing that you can't make the inverse work. There's not a reciprocal connection. There's this clear reciprocal, okay? Preventing bad is good. Preventing good isn't bad. That's the argument, okay? Again, it's been said over and over again. Where's the double count in that? If you're going to make the accusation, you could make the accusation that we're not sufficiently counting how horrible it is to prevent good, to prevent pleasure. You're saying it's big, huge, horrible. It is bad. It's bad to prevent a pleasure, just like it's bad to cause torture. That's your argument. The asymmetry is just pointing out that that's not true. You know you're not crying for the Martians who aren't playing on jet skis on Lake Funky Punk. You know you're not crying over it, because it's not a huge tragedy. But if there was a little Martian kid having chemotherapy and you had to watch it, a little tear might come down your cheek. Because that value's real. The value of the jet ski bullshit is, who cares?
Goodness of not bads, right? Put it another way, he talks about crying about the non-existent Martians, as though...
Right, crying for their non-existent fun.
Well, it's a powerful argument. But the thing...
Well, there, so why don't you just, if it's a powerful argument, why don't you let its power seep in and just concede, yeah, it's true. I mean, witnessing torture is a lot different than witnessing something not doing something it doesn't need to do. Yeah, it is different.
That the lack of action, the lack of crying about is an argument for something. Well, I don't cry about lots of things. I don't know. I don't cry about...
It's a metaphorical... I wasn't requiring you to actually cry. The point is that we sense these things and acknowledging them will cause some sense a creepiness, a pause, a sadness, lots of ways it can express itself in the sense that you're acknowledging this isn't good math. This number is ugly. This product is oof. Oof. Yeah, see that's oof. It stinks. That sucks. So lots of reactions. It's just an acknowledgement. So again, most people can understand the idea of of an emotional reaction. So you use the metaphor of an emotional reaction because that's how most people live. But the emotional reaction you want to be consistent with what we understand to be real value. And certainly there's real value in sentient organisms suffering. And we would have the expectation that we would have a face, an emotional face, consistent with the situation.
Football on TV every day, 24/7. Yeah? Soccer.
Right. Addiction. There's lots of there's lots of addictions being fed every day. The casinos are open 24 hours a day here.
On TV, 24/7. Every game televised for me. I don't cry about it, but it's not an argument for it.
I don't even know what that means. I don't cry about it. I don't know what that means. How is that applicable to this conversation? We're saying that we're using the word tragedy. So we're saying it's a tragedy to have unnecessary, wasted suffering. Suffering that didn't need to exist for some better purpose. Wasted. We could cry for that. We could be sad for that. Now we have pleasure over here that doesn't happen. No good reason. It was prevented. I'm saying the reaction is not going to be at all comparable. And the more you study it logically, the less capable you will be of manifesting an emotion. The more you think about, well, yeah, if you don't need something, there's no need, and there's no need. Yeah. I mean, it becomes logically impossible to find the bad in that circumstance.
Don't cry about, that we've not genetically modified tomato.
It's sort of like somebody dying, right? I mean, your first reaction is, oh, it's horrible, they died. And then you could think about it and you could say, wait a minute, they died in 3 seconds. What a great way to die. And they were going to die really soon anyway because they're 96 years old. And shit, getting hit by a car was the best thing that could have happened to that fucker. And you could feel good for them. You could say, oh shit, man, he evaded all the horrors. He didn't get Alzheimer's and didn't, eat his own poo and he didn't go through all this crap. I mean, damn. And then you could feel good that, hey, no, if it was something bad was going to happen. If the bad didn't happen, this other kind of bad happened, but it's not really bad because it's so much better than those other bads. So it's pretty much a good. It's so much better than those bads.
So they're purple instead of red. I don't cry about it. It's not an argument for it.
Well, again, so now he's back to, there's no point. I mean, once he starts using metaphors that has absolutely nothing to do with anything that has value, purple and red, I mean, he's back to denying the distinction between pain and pleasure, torture, and comfort. He's denying the real difference between these things. It's not just a color preference. It's not a food preference, asshole. The living creatures are living creatures with sentient feelings. They are tortured, and it's a fact. It's not just a food preference, asshole. It's not a color. It's not arbitrary. There's real negative signs, suffering. The positive is just implied. but it's not really a positive. It is kind of funny, right? You don't need the positive sign in front of the positive number because it's just implied. But the truth is, it's not real. So anyway, yeah, like I said, it's just not. As soon as you start, like I said, when you start comparing suffering, the distinction between torture and bliss as being colors, fuck you, I'm going home.